Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the annual meeting of New Champions here in Tianjin. We're so happy to have those in the room and also those online joining us from afar on this issue briefing on soil matters. I'm Tanya Strauss, and as the head of food and water here at the World Economic Forum, I'm very excited for the distinguished panel that's joining me for this conversation to not only keep the well-hidden secret and power of soil, but also convince you all that we have a ton to do together on the matter. So let me first start by introducing our amazing panel. Dr. Shenggen Fan, the chair and professor of China Agricultural University, as well as the vice chair of the International Rice Research Institute, IRRI. Ms. Doris Yu, the Senior Vice President of China for Yara International. Oh, you guys switched on me. Okay, very nice. Ali Silverstein, President and Group CEO of Desert Control, and also a uplink innovator. And then Will, who I now see on my left, is the Regional Managing Director for Asia Pacific for the Nature Conservancy. As we get started, I just want to talk about the fact that intensive farming has really damaged the agriculture ecosystem worldwide. We are looking at soil, which has produced 95% of the food we eat for millennia. And now a third of that soil globally is degraded. And we're looking at the opportunity to think about that here in China while we're in Tianjin. About 40% of arable land in China is also degraded. What does that mean? Why does soil matter? What is important about the role of soil? I think we all have a romantic perspective when we think of soil. It's dark and rich and it grows the foods we like to eat. But when it's degraded, it doesn't have the nutrient density, the water retention, and the importance of what it can do for climate and nature goals, as well as build farmer resilience around the world. Those farmers are someone that I really want to focus on as we discuss the role of healthy soil. 500 million small farmers around the world are the backbone of the food supply of each of us. So there is no one on earth not touched by that smallholder community. Here in China, 80% of the food for the country is generated by smallholder farmers. So they need support. Their voices and their actions and their knowledge are essential to any future transition that we would like to embark on, whether it's for net zero gains, whether it's for sustainability, whether it's for the future of consumption and economic growth. We need to work around the smallholder farmer. After energy, food will be the most significant transformation of our time. I strongly believe that. And I think the role of soil is underestimated. And that's exactly what we want to get into today with the discussion. So let me first turn to Dr. Shenggen Fan. I think there's few people who have such a comprehensive view of food systems in the world, if I may. So maybe over to you on how do we approach these daunting challenges in terms of the role of soil?
Well, here in China, we say that soil is the mother of everything, including food. So without soil, I think there will be no human being. So that's the importance of soil. As Tanya said, that unfortunately, our land, our soil have been degraded globally and here in China. It's not just 40% degradation, but also soil contamination. So many soils will not be able to be used for food production. Heavy metals, will cause health issues for the consumers, and the smallholders obviously will suffer from that. So what do we do with that? We know that better soil can contribute to better food and nutrition security. Nutrition, I want to emphasize the nutrition here, but a better soil, better management of land can also contribute to mitigation of the climate change. Huge potential and huge unknowns right now. So that's the potential we have not tapped much on climate change. Then obviously biodiversity. The great things that the Kunming and Montreal sort of compact or agreement have been signed. But let's not forget, we still have a huge job to do because it's food, it's agriculture. And that causes 60% or maybe even 70% of the loss of biodiversity. And biodiversity is very critical for our future food and nutrition security because diverse foods from diverse genetics, diverse types of food will help us to increase our diet. So here in China, just a couple of sentences about China. Chinese government has recognized the importance of land. This red line of 1.8 billion mu land has to be protected at any cost. But the quality of that land and the soil of the land is equally important. The government has introduced, for example, the big campaign of using organic fertilizers, big campaign to reduce the use of chemical fertilizers. So all this will help. And then at smallholders, how smallholders can benefit from that, from regenerative agriculture, circular agriculture, from the mixed, let's say, crop livestock food. Not centered about trade. Because urbanization, income increase, China imports 160 million tons of food every year. Most of this came from Brazil, from US, which also means every year Chinese is importing 160 million of topsoil, they need soil to produce, and they come back to China. They will be, or they are, in the waste stream of urban centers, and even more gradually, the rural areas. This sort of nutrition imbalance globally is a serious issue for us to consider. I will come back to that. Thank you, Tanya.
No, thanks so much, Sheng. I think we definitely want to come back to you because understanding these challenges is integral. What can we do about them, right? I wanted to sort of just emphasize two things you said that are really important. I mean, one is around the fact that farms are right now one of the greatest emitters of carbon. How do we transform them into being the biggest sinks for all kinds of positive nutrient density, right, across emissions? So that's number one. The second one is really to move not just from quantity, but the quality of how we're thinking about our land, our soil, and the resources required to preserve that. So let's come back in terms of the way we can address some of those opportunities. To harness the nexus of soil health and the role of the producer communities and some of these enabling factors that I think we'll get into, like finance and technology and policy to support those farmers to make those transitions, the World Economic Forum has been working for the past 2 years on a program called 100 Million Farmers. Why 100 million? I mentioned earlier that worldwide we have over 500 million small farms that are really the backbone of our food supply. If we can reach at least 20% of them, that's a tipping point. How do we all come together and really help to aggregate the work we're doing, not to just to have 1 + 1 = 2, but real system change and support 100 million farmers to make those transitions to climate smart, water smart, sustainable practices going forward. And I'm so pleased to introduce Doris from Yara, who's one of the leading partners on the soil health part of that program. It will look at farmer finance, rethinking economics of the grower community, but also the role of soil health and data. So Doris, maybe over to you on how are farmers dealing with this crisis and what are companies like Yara doing?
Sure. First, thanks Tanya and Forum for inviting Yara and myself to join this very important topic, and also very much echo Professor Fan's comments. To answer the question, food security here in China and across the globe ultimately depends on two things. One, soil health, and second, really the farmers who build and maintain that health. And farmers, particularly smallholder farmers, are really, as Tanya rightly pointed out, at the backbone of the global food system. And what is smallholder farmers? Smallholder farmers in China is defined as farmers who work on plots of land that is less than 0.7 hectare or less than 10 mu. There are today 600 million family farms across the world, and 70% of them are smallholder farms. In China, 210 million smallholder farms makes up 98% of the total farming population. And smallholder farmers today, they are facing various challenges which directly impact the soil health, food security, and farmers' livelihood. And here I would like to briefly mention 3 key challenges. First and foremost, smallholder farmers, they currently are lacking of access to knowledge about soil and crop, such as soil health indicators and analytics, which support the decision-making on the crop and soil management strategies. And secondly, there is the lack of access to technology, including precision irrigation system, smart farming tools, and often the time, this is not about only the technology, but also infrastructure and digital, including digital infrastructure that is not accessible to many rural and mountainous areas. And thirdly, also very importantly, there is the lack of market that encourages and enables smallholder farms to adopt the regenerative farming practice for better soil, and a mechanism that ensures farmers' business model remains profitable and feasible. As the food system transits from just valuing the crop to valuing both the crop and the ecosystem services, including healthy soil, clean water, biodiversity, and carbon capture, it follows that the risks and the costs involved and also value created must be redistributed fairly across the value chain. So to solve those challenges, particularly for the first two, digital innovations can act as a key enabler to empower the smallholder farmers to gain access to knowledge and technology for soil and regenerative farming practice. And recently, there has been increasing investment in this space, and Yara also over the years made significant investment around digital. For example, Yara globally has established 6 regional digital hubs, including 3 in Asia and 1 in Shanghai. And back in 2021, the China Digital Hub launched a knowledge exchange platform called 问问农, connecting millions of farmers to local experts and agronomists, providing really the crop diagnosis and recommendations powered by the latest technology. And as of today, the platform has already attracted 2.5 million eco-users, and we expect to further expand that platform to benefit more smallholder farmers across China. And on the third challenge, as I just mentioned, it really requires a close collaboration along the value chain. One great example I would very much like to share is a project called Growing Potato Farmers in Kenya. In Kenya, potato is the second largest, most important crop after maize. 800,000 smallholder farms cultivate potatoes, which resulted in 2.7 million downstream employment and contributes almost $500 million to Kenya's national economy. And on that project, Yara worked closely with the ecosystem partners such as Biocrop Science and Agricole to provide agriculture input package including soil testing, seed, crop nutrition, and protection solutions to really help the farmers, smallholder farmers, to increase the yield and improve quality of the crop. Meanwhile, the Co-op Bank of Kenya provides really affordable financing options to the smallholder farmers, and the company called Simplify provides guaranteed offtake of the quality produce from the farmers. In this way, Yara really strives to build an end-to-end ecosystem to help the farmers really tackle the challenges I just mentioned earlier. And in the future, we also look forward to build more similar value chain partnerships to support the farmers, mostly smallholder farmers, to achieve sustainable food production and enhanced livelihood.
Doris, thanks so much. I mean, I think the importance of this knowledge marketplace cannot be underscored, right? I think it's so, even thinking about the 2 million farmers you already have that are engaging with this, it's a huge opportunity to start to think about their needs and create fit-for-purpose solutions. And I know that you two changed seats on me, so I'm just gonna keep you on your toes and go to Will first, okay, because we've been talking about the role of finance. And I know that the nature-based solutions agenda is starting to look at how do we monetize and look at a series of co-benefits, which is really what soil health can provide, whether it's water retention, biodiversity retention, or some of the other areas that both Doris and Chengyan mentioned. From a TNC perspective, what are you seeing, and how can we finance this transition? Do we hold water? You're gonna love my water puns as we go, but do we hold water? Are the banks and the insurance sector gonna be interested in this? How do we attract them?
Well, thanks, Tanya, and it's a good question, and I might just tell a little bit of a story about how we're approaching this, because I think you need to look at it from the fundamentals from a farmer's perspective, not necessarily just the market more broadly. But just briefly, the Nature Conservancy is working in 70 countries around the world. We have 2 main goals: biodiversity and tackling climate change. But we realised that the only way really to tackle biodiversity and deal with climate change was to also be working on sustainable agriculture and food production, which is why I'm up here on the panel today as opposed to a biodiversity panel. And the global stats really drive this home. We've heard some already, but 90% of the land use change globally is driven by food production and agriculture. 70% of freshwater use is related to agriculture and food production. So for a conservation organisation, we really need to be working on this type of topic. We also realise that we don't win on conservation, we don't win on any of these topics unless we bring rural communities, farming communities and people along in the journey. They need to benefit from this transition towards a sort of a conservation-friendly future or a climate-safe future. So putting people and putting farmers, to Tanya's point, at the centre of everything we do is really critical. Which brings us to China. In China, the government, rightly so, has put a huge focus on food security and also on rural economic development. And to do this, they're showing increasing interest in more sustainable agricultural production, as we've heard about from Dr. Fan. You see less soil loss, you see less evaporation, increased fertility of the soil. And one methodology that we've tested is this, it's called conservation tillage. So rather than, in simple terms, rather than clearing the crop residue at the end of a harvest, you leave it on the soil. And this protects the soil, it helps it to retain moisture, it helps build up carbon, it helps get, you see earthworms coming back when they once were not there. And we've been working with Dr. Fan's team to assess the benefits of this, and I'm coming to the point of the question around the economic benefits and how we finance it. But in the Yellow River Basin, where we've been working on this, particularly around the wheat farming, and it's only a very small sample size at this point in time, so I don't want to suggest that it could be rolled out elsewhere, but you're seeing very substantial improvement from a farming point of view. So a 10% improvement in soil fertility, a 7% increase in carbon sequestration, which we're not trading yet, we're not trying to sell those carbon credits, a 7% increase in soil water storage, so going to Tanya's point about the ability for the soil to actually retain water. And this is coming to the point of the question, a 20% increase in income, a 58% decrease in fossil fuel use for the farmer, and a 17% decrease in costs overall. So this is where it starts to make economic sense for farmers, and then if they can be tied to getting guaranteed sort of income as well. So from our point of view, yes, there are trading mechanisms out there. It's carbon, there could be water trading, there could be biodiversity trading in the future, which are all very exciting. But if you go back to the basic economic model for a farmer, if they can reduce their costs, increase their productivity, and then get some preferential buying through a company, that's a massive uptick for them, and it makes sense economically without carbon trading perhaps, and that may come down the pipeline in the future, which would be great.
No, that sounds great to me, because otherwise we'll be waiting for a while until we figure out carbon trading for agriculture and food around the world. And I think we don't have that, we don't have the luxury of time. And Shengen will know this better than me. Do we have 6 harvests left until 2030 or 7? I think it's 6. I mean, we have to get this right? So I think what you're talking about, and to Doris's point on the integrated value chain itself, that it's not just one single support, it's this whole bundled approach of how we address some of the challenges they're facing. And now I definitely want to come to Ali on this, because innovation holds a number of ways in which we address this. So as a recent Uplink top innovator, what are you seeing out there in terms of bold innovations, and what do you need as an innovator to be supported to scale those up?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. We definitely see a lot of bold innovations out there, and I think we definitely need them as well. I'd like to comment on Will's point on being on this panel rather than a biodiversity one. But if we think about the loss of soil that we have, 12 million hectares of fertile land perish to desertification every year. That's 2,000 football fields every hour turning to sand. Now that is truly biodiversity loss. I did a calculation of that, and I kind of figured out that is in weight of biodiversity loss equal to something like 25 million fully grown elephants that we lose every year. So innovation is definitely needed in this area, and I think it's important in the area of innovation to appreciate the complexity and interconnectivity as well between soil, water, carbon, biodiversity, natural resources, and even energy, right? And those are the most important input costs for the farmer as well. And I believe that solutions to this lie at the intersection between science, technology and in close harmony with nature. I mean, if we're going to solve this as well, we're going to need to look at new and multidisciplinary approaches. We're not going to solve those problems with the same kind of thinking that's created them. I think we at Desert Control are one example of that, where we've taken knowledge from basically oil and gas industry and from Norway, where we have lots of knowledge in geology, rheology, fluid dynamics, nanotechnology, etc. And we've created a solution to liquefy natural minerals that are very critical and important to the soil in a way that we can bring them back and restore degraded soils with results of reducing water consumption by up to 50%, which also enables us to utilize much better the important nutrients and other inputs, reducing soil salinization and constant degradation of the soil. But I think as innovators that it's important to not think in a siloed approach as well, because we need to collaborate. And that's where I'm very inspired by seeing so much other innovations going on in the technology space. Everything that's happening on, sensoring technology, to be able to listen to the life in our soil, to listen to those superheroes. I mean, in a tiny teaspoon of healthy soil, there are more living organisms than there are human beings on this planet. And they should maybe have some rights as well, right? So we should listen to them, use the technology, look at all the innovations we have in precision farming, even in the biotech space of new resilient species of crops, of microbe inoculation that we can put back into the soil, and also the digital space where land management services is really important to also drive education and awareness. Because we also need to have more than innovation. We need to have a shift of mindset. Because soil is like a bank account, right? And everybody knows if we just keep withdrawing from that bank account, eventually we're going to run out. And actually right now, we are in serious credit card debts to Mother Earth. And that's what we need to restore. And we need to think more holistically about this as asset management, because we want to leave those assets to future generation at a higher value than we first got them. So I think this is the important areas, bringing it all together, looking at it holistically, also combining new business models with financing mechanisms, policy frameworks, and education and awareness, because soil is an underground matter that we need to bring to the surface, and we need to make people see that this is really exciting stuff, and those tiny little life forms down there are the superheroes that may just save us all.
Fantastic. Ali, that's great. I mean, I think, first of all, loving the puns, so keep those coming, because I think it does track with the wider public who is not necessarily aware of the role they can play. I mean, we're talking about structural change, systems change, we're talking about private sector and government policy, but actually every day, consumers and farmers are connected to that change. And I think part of that innovation ecosystem doesn't happen on its own. As you're saying, you need to really help these innovators know where to be and be connected to the purpose and implement and scale. But what are you missing? I mean, before we move on from this, what is your ask as an innovator here at Tianjin at the meeting? There's a number of sectors, present. What kind of support do you need today?
Well, I think for us, as with any innovators, I mean, we need entrepreneurship. We need startups, and those are small companies that have a high degree of risk. I mean, we've been doing 12 years of R&D and 5 years of independent validation. That takes time in order to pass those risk barriers where the solutions are seen as acceptable for financing partners, for investors, for NGOs and other parties to actually embrace and support. And I think that we need to maybe revisit some of our risk assessment matrices and look at how we can much more quickly embrace promising innovations and bring them to market at scale, right? So that's what we really need.
Fantastic. So I do want to invite some Q&A from the audience, but before I do, I did want to come back to Schengen, because I know we gave you the responsibility to frame the context, but also, in terms of solutions, what's promising here in China and globally from your perspective?
Thank you, Tanya. If I just discuss the challenges, I become part of the problems. So I have to offer some sort of suggest solutions.
Absolutely.
Number one is the future technologies and innovation must have multiple wins. And a green revolution is very much win on yield. But today, we must win on nutrition. For example, rice. No, I'm vice chair. Chair is here. Dr. Fat used to be Minister of Agriculture. He's my boss. So rice, well, Eva is working on rice. Used to be just increase the yield, IR8 or IR38. But today, nutrition is a very big part of it. Biofortified, vitamin A, iron and zinc into rice. So you eat the same rice, but you got much nutrition out of that. Another win is on environment. Yes, lower carbon, absolutely. Another practice is innovations, particularly innovations. Certain genes can reduce the fertilizer application efficiency by 30%. So, and obviously smallholders have to benefit from that. So that's number one. Innovations must have multiple wins. Otherwise, we will continue to see the trade-offs. The second is to really reform our current support system. Right now, globally, we spend $700 billion on subsidies. Here in China, global subsidy probably is 20% from China. We got to reform that to support smallholders. Smallholders, if they introduce certain, let's say, lower carbon technology in rice, they don't increase yield, they don't increase income, they have no incentive. Can we use, let's say, the carbon market, or maybe even government subsidies to support farmers to produce lower carbon, nutritious, and healthy, by the way, no glycemic index rise. That's another one I forgot. Another win on health, directed on health. So reform that subsidy to support smallholders to produce healthy, nutritious, and sustainable food. Then finally, I think our diets. Because diets actually very much linked to production, to smallholders. So if the consumers are willing to pay a bit extra, if the consumers are educated or change their behavior to consume healthy, nutritious foods. Big job to do. I mean, we try to analyze that. Consumers can be changed, but they need knowledge, information, and support. Private sector, government support. I will end over here. Thank you, Daniel.
Fantastic. So let me just take the last few minutes of our discussion here and open it up to the audience. I think we'll have time for one or two questions, and if you'd like to speak, just wait for the mic so our audience online can hear the question as well.
I have a quick yes or no question. If a smallholder's plot of land were to lie fallow for a year, would there be a reduction in CO2 emissions? So if we could measure that, quantify it, turn it into a carbon credit, then the smallholder would be able to get income from selling the carbon credit. Is that correct?
So we'll just take maybe one more question and then we can come back, but great question. Please.
I have a question on soil conservation practices. So today, certainly there's a lot of technology and best practices available for commercial scale, large farmers, but we're talking about over 500 million smallholder farmers. So digital farming, integrated practices, a lot of that is not easily can be adopted by those smallholders. So my question is on what can we do? I mean, the government, the NGOs, business can do to encourage smallholder farmers to adopt some of the perhaps practical or easily adoptable practices, and just want to get an opinion from the panelists.
Thank you for your question. Great. I think we'll just have time for two questions. So I know Shenggen was already nodding when the first question came, so I'm going to come to him first,
Sure.
but I really give the rest of you a chance to answer as well.
Yeah.
Please.
I think fallow land, yes, absolutely. There will be carbon sequestration from that. In northern part of China, actually very close to here, maybe 50 kilometers away from here, the underground water has really come down to the historical low level. This is the place, hot space, hot spot for underground water use. So what the government has done is to give farmers 500 yuan subsidy per move without doing anything, particularly without using underground water. 500 yuan per mu, you can multiply that by 15, come to a hectare. Maybe $1,000 per hectare, that's pretty significant money. So farmers are doing that already, but not necessarily using a carbon sequestration methodology. It's more underground water depletion. So that's, I think, then the incentive for farmers to adopt some sort of more it's a conservation type of technology. Yes, absolutely. We found that rotation of maize and soybean together can really help to reduce the carbon emission, improve the soil quality. But farmers are facing some challenges, particularly mechanization. When you have one crop, maize or soybean, you can use harvester planters to go there. But when you have two crops and they are rotated or maybe intercropping, that's a challenge. So that must be solved.
Doris, do you agree? Do you want to come in? And then Ollie right after that.
Sure. I think on carbon reduction, we actually, at Yara, we did actually do a project with, for example, food value chain partnerships on the carbon reduction for maize, for example, in Shandong province. And after 3 years experience, we do see using one of the third-party calculators called Farmer Tools, we have calculated actually the carbon reduction using Yara's solution actually achieved the carbon reduction of 25%. And meanwhile, there is a 20% less ammonia input, and also 16% of the yield increase. So it's a quite positive feedback we found.
Fantastic. And Ollie, can we count on you to demonstrate how soil is going to be a superhero? I hope that's built into your answer.
Yeah, and I'd like to address the question of fallowing, and it's not a simple yes or no if that's going to drive carbon sequestration, right? Because I'm seeing that happening in more arid areas of the world where it's done for water conservation initiatives, right? And if that soil is left with its topsoil open and in an arid environment, that's going to drive the opposite, right? So you're going to deplete that soil, you're going to bake it and cook it, and you're going to have the rest of the biodiversity gone. So in those cases, it's not going to do so. You need to combine it with cover crops and actually tactics to actually build soil health while you are fallowing for that to be successful. And if you look at that carbon sequestration potential, I mean, we've talked about how much soil is degraded around the world, and if we're able to restore those degraded soils, there is analysis out there saying that that has a potential of 6 gigaton per year in added carbon uptake. So there is a huge potential in this.
That sounds like superhero status to me. Will?
Yeah, superheroes who actually capture carbon for free.
Just quickly on the second question, I think we shouldn't underestimate smallholders' interest in education, interest in learning, being engaged. And our experience is when you take them on the journey, you involve them in the science, you involve them in the trials, you come back and you share the results, they're very interested. And farmers globally are the world's great innovators. They like to innovate. They've had to innovate to keep up with growing populations, to keep up with pests, to keep up with whatever it is. So I think smallholders, yeah, we sometimes treat them as if they can't keep up, but in reality they are keeping up, and we just need to bring them on the journey and give them a chance to learn and adapt and try new things.
But following does not mean you don't do anything. Yeah, cover crop, green manure, definitely will.
So I think, Doris, do you want to come in?
Yeah,
one last point?
One quick comment. I think, again, as I just mentioned, it really requires the full value chain players work together, right? The cost and risk and value needs to really distribute it fairly across value chain, but so that we can really scale up the regenerative agriculture. But before that, there is a very simple approach also advocated by Yara. So there is a 4R. So applying fertilizers in the right product, in the right time, right amount, and also in the right place. Just in this simple approach, you're already supporting this sustainable agriculture.
Fantastic. No, and I know that we could continue this conversation, and we will throughout this week, but I just really want to thank each of you for your passion and your commitment to soil health. In my mind, I feel like we have been able to establish the role of soil health, but the real superhero is the farmers, right? I think there's a consensus there, and so I invite us all to make deposits into the soil banks, Ali, out there, and sort of rethink the way we approach this from a farmer-centric, multiple wins and partnership mindset. So congratulations to the panel. Thank you again, and let's reach 100 million farmers together. Thank you, everyone.